Revenge films.
My name is Jonathan. It turns out that my wife is cheating on me and having an affair. And the person that noticed that first wasn't me, but it was actually my son who's in the first grade.
Hey, Daddy, I think that Mommy's meeting up with a man that I've never seen before. Sometimes I catch her whispering on the phone, and then right after that, she walks out of the house.
What? Kevin, is that true? I didn't notice anything strange at all, but I also knew that children are sensitive and observant. Immediately after that, I started trailing after my wife, and it didn't take long. I was easily able to catch her in the act. She would be cheating on me whenever I was at work, and while our son would be at elementary school. After completing the bare minimum of the chores at the house, my wife would dress up and put on makeup like it was nothing, and then she would go outside somewhere. Once I was certain that my wife was having an affair, I figured that it would be hard for me to secure evidence by myself, considering I was working full-time. So I decided to hire a detective agency and have them investigate, as well as find out who she was cheating on me with. And, as a result of their investigation, I was able to find out that she was cheating on me with her former manager from the company that she had quit a year ago. This boyfriend of hers was also married. However, right now he was on a short-term assignment at this office location, and he's living in an apartment building by himself. The detective agency secured photographs as evidence, and there were multiple images of them going in and out of that apartment as though they were a married couple themselves. There were also photos of the two of them kissing inside of the car, and it made me want to throw up. My wife had been working full-time at this company for years, but last year she said that she wanted to focus on raising our son, and that's why she wanted to quit. At the time, I didn't think it was strange at all. However, it turns out that my wife had quit the company like this so that she would be able to meet up with her boyfriend freely. As for the man, he was using the excuse of external business meetings in order to meet up with her at his apartment. And it turns out that these two had been continuing this for the entire year since my wife had quit the company. I couldn't forgive my wife for having an affair like this to begin with, but what I couldn't forgive her for the most was that she was using the excuse that she wanted to focus on taking care of our son. It was a disgusting reason. I wanted a divorce as soon as possible. Of course, I used to love her, and that's why I married her, but at this point I could only look at her completely disgusted. However, the person that stopped me from immediately leaving my wife was my son, Kevin. Just as one might expect, the presence of a mother was really strong for such a young son, and despite knowing that she was having an affair, it seemed that he still had feelings for his mother. And, more than anything, I love my son. If it was for the sake of my son's happiness, I was willing to do anything. However, at this point, would it ever be possible for me to make things work with my wife again? After finding out all of this, I didn't have a single drop of love left for her. It's not like it would be impossible for me to put on the act of making things work with her, but that's not what my son was looking for. My son simply wanted that we would go back to getting along with each other as a mother and father, is what he said. However, that would probably be impossible too. And then, the person that drilled the last nail into the coffin was, of course, my wife in the end.
Hey, next month I want to go on a 3-day vacation with my friend Jessica. Would that be okay?
Your friend Jessica? You mean your friend from college?
Yeah, her. You remember her, right? That would be okay, right?
Sure, but it was crystal clear to me that she wasn't going to be going on a vacation with her friend Jessica from college. However, since my wife was insistent on going, it was too much of a chore to try to come up with a reason that made sense to stop my wife from going. And so my wife was up on cloud 9 as she happily departed for her vacation. However, On the first day of my wife's vacation, the most unexpected and unimaginable incident occurred. "Sir, your mother is in critical condition. You must come here immediately." What? When I received the phone call from the doctor, I went running straight to the hospital. That was when I found out that my wife's mother had suddenly collapsed due to illness. Since my wife's father had passed away when she was still a young child, my mother-in-law was my wife's last remaining biological family. I desperately sent my wife multiple messages, but no matter how many times I sent her a message, she wouldn't even open them. How much fun is she having over there? Even after that, I needed her to notice her phone, so I repeatedly called her and messaged her. But even after hours and days, I was never able to receive a response from her. In the end, when I was finally able to get in contact with her, it was after my mother-in-law's funeral and all of the other arrangements had already been completed. As soon as my wife got home, I asked her, "Why didn't you respond to my messages? Why didn't you pick up the phone? I sent you so many, didn't I?" When I said that, she replied that while she was on vacation, her phone was starting to have trouble over there, and that her phone was dead the entire time. It was obvious that she was just coming up with a random lie, but then, when I told her that her mother had passed away, she suddenly changed her tune.
What? You're joking, right?
And she stood there in shock. But then my son chimed in and said,
It's true, Mommy. Grandma died. She's gone.
When she heard it from Kevin, my wife raised her voice and started sobbing. Honestly, I was also sad that my mother-in-law had passed away, but seeing my wife standing in front of me at this point, who had just enjoyed 3 days of a vacation cheating on me, I wasn't able to feel sorry for her. If anything, she did this to herself, and if I were to feel sorry for anybody, it would be my mother-in-law. Up until the moment she took her last breath, she was desperately calling out my wife's name. But her only daughter never ended up coming. I felt much more sorry for her. But after this incident, I had completely lost the last bit of love that was left in my heart, and I decided to finally get revenge on my wife. A few days later, while Kevin wasn't home, I sat down and had a conversation with my wife. And then, when I told her that I wanted to get a divorce, she started crying and said, "What are you saying after I just lost my mother?" When that was her response, I replied to her that she was the one having an affair and that she brought this upon herself. That was when my wife's face went completely pale. I continued not to tell her that I wasn't the one that actually noticed the affair, that it was our son that realized she was cheating on me. My wife was even more shocked. On top of that, to make sure that my wife couldn't make any further excuses for this, I let her know that I contacted Jessica, and Jessica had no clue what vacation plans I was talking about, and that she had never made plans for a trip with my wife. When I told her I had this witness statement, my wife wasn't able to say anything back to me anymore. In the beginning, when I asked her friend Jessica, it seemed like my wife had already spoken to her in advance and she tried to come up with an excuse. But when I told her about the truth that my mother-in-law had just passed away and that I just wanted to get in touch with my wife but I wasn't able to reach her, that was when Jessica told me everything. And even though my son had asked me not to get a divorce from my wife, I was sorry, but because I didn't have a millimeter of love left and I couldn't stand to be with this woman anymore, I chose to get a divorce. From there, she started begging and crying.
I'm so sorry. I'll never do this again, so please forgive me.
She got down on her knees to apologize, but she had taken it so far that our son had to notice she was having an affair, so I knew that it wasn't just once or twice that she cheated on me. If anything, it was enough that she would go on a 3-day vacation with this man. That's why I had no intention of backing down from the divorce, and I told her that I would be collecting a full settlement fee from both her and her boyfriend. When she heard that, my wife crumbled to the floor in tears. And after that, I made the decision to sit with my son and face him and tell him everything. When my son came home from school, even though he was still a young child, it seemed that he had already suspected that my wife and I were going to get a divorce. He looked like he wanted to cry, but he also seemed to understand that even if we were to continue like this, we wouldn't be able to be the same family like we were before. I faced him directly, and I told him that he was going to have an even more difficult time if we remain a family, and I did my best to explain it to him. And then I continued to ask my son that he had the choice of whether to live together with me or with his mother. He replied that he wanted a little bit of time to think about it, but I figured that that was a given because whoever he ends up choosing would mean that he wouldn't be able to see the other parent anymore. I knew how kind-hearted my son was, and even if he ended up choosing his mother, I was planning on respecting his decision and letting him do as he wished. On the other hand, I made sure to collect a high settlement fee from my wife's boyfriend who had destroyed my family. And since I also sent a letter of notice to the company, not only was the affair completely exposed, the company found out that he was using external meetings as an excuse to secretly meet up with my wife, and they were furious. He was not only fired, but I heard that they also made him return the salary for those hours spent on the affair. Now, of course, his own family found out about the affair and he was divorced, and his wife also collected a settlement fee from the both of them. After that, my son told me he wanted to talk to me, and I sat down with him. He chose to stay with me. Even as a young child, my son seemed to understand that cheating was a bad thing, and that's why he chose to come with me. That being said, he was so young that I'm sure he was at the age that he would miss his mother, and he had tears in his eyes. But I assured him that just because we were getting a divorce doesn't mean that he wouldn't be able to see his mother anymore. I told him he could talk to and see his mom whenever he wanted, and he seemed relieved. As for my ex-wife, when her affair was discovered, it seemed that she finally understood just how badly she had messed up. Every day she was apologizing to me and begging me to start over, and multiple times she said that she would never betray me ever again, but after seeing the images of her cuddled up to her manager, there was no chance in my mind. I told her clearly that I had no intention of ever doing that. The divorce went through. My son and I remained at that house, and since her mother had passed away, my wife moved back into her family home. That being said, she had already quit her job, and even if she were to start working, she had to pay the settlement fee to me, as well as the settlement fee to the manager's wife, and so there was no doubt that she would be living a poor life for years. But my wife was the one that was blinded by her own desires and chose the path of cheating, so I have no sympathy.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.